Hello YouTube! Here's my 5th Versus video, keeping up with my new theme of pitting movie era characters against characters from the Tales of the Jedi comics. So, for your approval, Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Vodo-Siosk Baas. So, I won't keep you waiting any longer. And we start by comparing their bios. Just joking. Their life histories don't really have much bearing on who would win in a scrap. Or do they? Instructed by Yoda, trained by Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi went on to become one of the finest Jedi Knights and one of the Order's greatest sword masters. As a Padawan, he cut down the Sith apprentice Darth Maul, an achievement that earned him his knighthood, and he spent the next 10 years training Anakin Skywalker, the rising star of the Jedi Order. It was Kenobi who was sent to investigate the assassination attempts on Senator Padme Amidala, unearthing a vast conspiracy that led to Count Dooku, the ex-Jedi leader of the Confederacy of Independent Systems. However, Kenobi's investigation was called off when the Clone Wars began, and he was shoehorned into military service as a Jedi General. Through sheer tenacity, Kenobi survived the brutal challenges of the Clone Wars and was named to the Jedi Council. One of the few survivors of the Great Jedi Purge, Kenobi did his part in attempting to fight back, challenging the fallen Anakin Skywalker, now the Sith Lord Darth Vader, to a duel to the death on Mustafar. Kenobi prevailed and disappeared into exile to watch over Anakin's son, Luke, though Vader survived. Kenobi re-emerged in Zero BBY to aid the Rebel Alliance against the Galactic Empire, though he was forced to confront Vader so Luke and his allies could escape, and was defeated in the ensuing lightsaber duel. Kenobi transcended the material plane and became a Force spirit, and returned periodically to advise and aid Luke. Vodo-Siosk Baas was one of the greatest Jedi Masters of his era, renowned for both his skill in combat and his talents as a scholar. Many of the most famous Jedi of his time were former students of his, though the infamous fallen Jedi turned Sith Lord Exar Kun was also one of Baas's alums. When Baas attempted to limit Kun's studies into the dark side of the Force, Kun went renegade, and delved into ancient Sith mausoleums in search of artifacts and secrets, re-emerging as a twisted Darksider. When Ulic Qel-Droma became the visible face of the new Sith threat, Baas knew that the true mastermind was Exar Kun, now Dark Lord of the Sith. After Qel-Droma was captured and put on trial by the Republic, Kun burst in to free his erstwhile apprentice, murdering the Supreme Chancellor in front of the entire senatorial gathering moments before Baas arrived. Baas attempted to reason with his fallen student, though their interaction quickly turned sour and Kun drew his lightsaber. In the ensuing duel, Baas took the early advantage, but was quickly overwhelmed when Kun revealed his latest modifications to his lightsaber. Incapable of properly defending against a saber staff, Baas was driven back and cut down. Baas would return as a Force spirit thousands of years later, aiding Luke Skywalker's fledgling Jedi Praxium against Exar Kun's own spiritual resurrection. So, who has the cooler bio? Obviously Kenobi. Involvement in wars and conspiracy theories always add up to more entertaining stories than the musing of scholars. But this won't really figure into the verdict. This next one will. And as always, I will begin properly by examining their martial arts training. Obi-Wan Kenobi was one of the greatest Jedi sword masters of his age, and was recognized by Mace Windu as the greatest Surisu master of the era. Surisu was the defense-oriented third form of lightsaber combat, designed to focus on blast deflection and energy efficiency. In addition, he was also a master of Ataru, a fast-paced martial art with a heavy focus on speed and agility, and he backed this up with advanced training in Shicho, Naiman, and Sokan. As a Padawan, he dabbled in Shien and the martial art Taijutsu. Thanks to his specialization in Surisu, Kenobi demonstrated a great deal of efficiency and control. This was backed up by a high degree of speed and agility, thanks to his Ataru training. Kenobi was good at fighting large groups as well as single opponents and was an expert at blast deflection. In keeping with his Naiman training, Kenobi had some skill with dual blades, and was an expert at chaining force-based attacks into his lightsaber sequences. Kenobi is also an expert unarmed combatant and has some skill as a marksman, though obviously he prefers to avoid using blasters. Kenobi's offense is strong and fast-paced, demonstrating a great deal of variety. Sometimes he relies on the overwhelming speed indicative of Ataru, or other times he just uses Shicho to doggedly herd you around. His defense is nothing short of perfect. What more need be said? Befitting such an experienced military leader and a student of Sokan, Kenobi is an expert tactician, marked by his reliance on deception and evasion to accomplish his goals. In his own words, a fight is never a goal in itself. Sometimes it is simply a distraction from the true goal, and best countered with a larger distraction. Among his achievements as a martial artist, Vodo-Siosk Baas trained the infamous Jedi killer Exar Kun, for whatever that's worth. As a Jedi weapon master of great renown, Baas was a master of staff fighting, favoring this more simplistic weapon over the lightsaber, ironically despite his skills as a Jedi artisan. Thanks to the 6 tentacles that comprised his limbs, Baas demonstrated extreme speed and agility, and his technique was blindingly fast and efficient. He was highly effective against groups and was no doubt skilled in blast deflection. Thanks to his centuries of experience, Baas had no trouble off-balancing opponents with his precise technique. However, he was incapable of properly defending himself against dual blades or saber staffs, though he can hardly be blamed given the rarity of both. Offensively, Vodo Baas was strong and precise, moving with blinding speed. His defense was capable, if somewhat specialized. He had no trouble defending against traditional duelists or even groups of opponents, but give someone dual blades or a saber staff, and he won't have a clue. Ordinarily, a contest of this sort would boil down to the typical specialist versus generalist debate, Kenobi being a Surisu specialist, while Baas the martial arts trainer would have multiple fighting disciplines under his belt. However, neither duelist is what they seem. Kenobi might devote more to his practice of Surisu than any of his other skills, but he is still a master of Ataru with advanced training in Shicho and Naiman. Kenobi has demonstrated himself to be an incredibly versatile and flexible fighter, geared towards a wide variety of situations, from ritualized single combat to chaotic battles to silent infiltration. Ironically, it is Vodo Baas who is the specialist. Kenobi has mastered a few of the most flexible and versatile fighting forms in order to prepare himself for almost any situation. Baas, on the other hand, has mastered everything in order to prepare himself for one very specific situation: single combat. That isn't to say he's useless on the battlefield, when he is in fact quite capable, but overall he is clearly in his element in one-on-one combat. But the thing is, he is geared towards very specific types of single combat, traditional blade on blade. In the novel Labyrinth of Evil, Dooku muses about fighters who become so devoted to technical perfection that they leave themselves vulnerable to unorthodox or improvised tactics that fall outside the rote responses they devote themselves to, something Dooku describes as enslavement to form. And Vodo-Siosk Baas is emblematic of precisely those sorts of fighters. In both of his duels with Exar Kun, Baas matches Kun in traditional blade-to-blade combat no problem, but as soon as Kun pulls something unexpected out of the bag, be it his dual blades in their first fight or the saber staff in their second, Baas has nothing. And the unexpected is precisely what Kenobi can be expected to pull out of the bag. Obi-Wan Kenobi gets the edge as a lightsaber duelist. And now I compare their physical abilities. Now, for this video, I'm assuming that Kenobi is in his Revenge of the Sith physical prime. So in other words, he's a glutton for punishment who just won't fucking die. Now, I happen to be in possession of the Clone Wars campaign guide, which just so happens to contain Obi-Wan Kenobi's role-playing statistics, which means I can tell you with absolute accuracy and certainty what his physical capabilities are. His strength is 15, which means he can lift 150 pounds above his head military press style. His dexterity is 16 and his constitution is 14, which means he's really fast and really fucking tough. However, Kenobi is still a squishy little human thing. He's good at taking pain and injury, though he does have his limits. Vodo-Siosk Baas is an elderly Kravaki male, though he remains physically able despite his advanced age. As a Kravaki, his body is composed of a chitinous exoskeleton with 6 tentacles as limbs. Using 4 of the tentacles as his legs and 2 as his arms, he's capable of great speed and agility. Now, I happen to be in possession of the Jedi Academy training manual, which contains Vodo Baas's role-playing game statistics, so I can tell you with absolute certainty what his physical capabilities are. His strength is 11, which means he can lift 110 pounds above his head in a military press. His dexterity is 15 and his constitution is 13, which means he is very fast and pretty tough. However, while he is still extremely fit for a being of his years, he's still obscenely old. Statistically, Kenobi is faster, stronger, and tougher than Baas. Add this to the fact that Baas is ancient and Kenobi isn't, and then consider that Kenobi is a glutton for punishment and yet he's still standing, and you have a winning combination. Obi-Wan Kenobi gets the physical edge. And now I compare their Force abilities. Kenobi is a reasonably skilled Force wielder, and while he tends to focus primarily on his lightsaber skills, his Force abilities are still extremely powerful. While his ability to lift and manipulate large objects with telekinesis is relatively limited, he throws about smaller objects with consummate ease. His combative applications of the Force are quite overwhelming, and his Force push was powerful enough to match that of Darth Vader, then the most powerful Force wielder in existence. He used grips and pulls to disarm opponents, tearing weapons from their grasp or even destroying them. He's even used a powerful Force repulse to blow the Jedi bounty hunter Dirge apart after his adversary attempted to smother Kenobi in his own musculature. Kenobi's telepathic skills were also extremely advanced, and he frequently used mind tricks to accomplish his ends. While he wasn't capable of battle meditation, Kenobi was a capable student of the beast trick ability, allowing him to influence and control the minds of even the most feral animals. When given time to concentrate, he was even able to influence tens at a time, though only with great strain. Kenobi is also a capable user of Tutaminis, using it to absorb and deflect blaster bolts and flamethrower blasts, even projectiles. Various video games have depicted Kenobi using this power to absorb Force lightning, but this is purely a game mechanic. He can't actually do that. But just because he isn't Yoda doesn't mean he isn't a total hard-ass. Vodo-Siosk Baas was a powerful Force wielder, though many of his skills were devoted to boosting his physical capabilities in keeping with his more martial focuses. Examples of this included his use of Force speed in combat. However, his more arcane abilities were still quite advanced. One of his most notable powers was his application of Force Weapon, augmenting his simple wooden quarterstaff with the Force to enable it to parry lightsaber blades and withstand energy-based attacks. He had little difficulty disarming opponents with telekinesis, and has even applied this talent against opposing Force wielders. His telepathic abilities were also extremely advanced, and his applications have ranged from long-distance telepathic communication to the highly advanced battle meditation, allowing him to bolster the morale of allies while demoralizing the enemy. Baas has even internalized this ability, boosting his own focus and morale through battle mind. However, the pinnacle of Vodo Baas's ability to wield the Force was the Sever Force power, the most powerful and arguably most horrifying of the abilities granted to Lightsiders. Creating a barrier of lightside energy, Baas could sever an opponent's connection to the Force, usually just temporarily, but permanently if he so chooses. Obviously, an ability of this sort would only be used as a last resort, but it would be practically unbeatable in any scenario. However, he has only been observed using it in the company of other Jedi, with the blockage reinforced by their powers. Overall, Vodo-Siosk Baas is an interesting case. He tends to refrain from the more mundane applications of the Force, instead relying on his martial prowess to carry him through. But when he does resort to attacking with the Force, he instantly demonstrates the most advanced and arcane of abilities. This is an interesting contest. You have one who uses the most fundamental Force abilities relatively casually, but whose knowledge of the higher mysteries is comparatively limited. And you have another who refrains until absolutely necessary, but then pulls the most powerful abilities out of the bag. Now, given the nature of how Sever Force works, by creating a barrier of light side energy to cut a target off from the Force, I'm curious over whether or not it can even be used against a fellow Lightsider. Against the Darksider, no problem. But wouldn't a barrier of light side energy be more of the same to a Lightsider? Besides, even if this ability could be used against a Lightsider, I don't think Baas would be willing to resort to it in combat against a fellow Jedi, even if to the death. Now, could Baas use the Force to disarm Kenobi? Definitely. Would this faze him? No. Kenobi is an expert at unarmed combat, and has displayed little hesitation in attacking opponents armed with lightsabers while using nothing but his bare fucking hands. However, battle meditation trumps mind trick, so this contest is one of variety versus magnitude, and simply put, Baas has the magnitude, Kenobi doesn't. Vodo-Siosk Baas gets the edge as a Force wielder. And now I compare their chosen weapons. A lightsaber in Kenobi's case, not a lightsaber in Baas's case. The lightsaber Obi-Wan Kenobi wielded as a Jedi Master throughout the Clone Wars was the embodiment of the changing mentality of the Jedi Order. It wasn't constructed as a meditative exercise, but was built to handle the rigors of combat. The design of the hilt was skeletal and utilitarian, intended to be easily disassembled for field maintenance. The pommel contained a ring of protrusions that marked Kenobi's lightsaber, and no doubt contained a reserve power cell. The activator was throttle style, with the charging port just below it. The middle third of the lightsaber was taken up by a ridged hand grip, before thinning out into the narrow neck that led up to the emitter, with the bulge halfway along it containing yet another reserve power cell. Kenobi used a single blue-hued Adagan crystal as the focusing lens. The lightsaber was equipped with water seals and operated on a bifurcating ignition cycle, allowing it to function underwater. Despite his reputation as a Jedi artisan with a talent for fabricating lightsabers, Vodo-Siosk Baas instead chose to wield a simple wooden quarterstaff as his primary weapon. Empowering it through the Force, Baas enabled his simple stick to parry lightsabers, and by channeling Force energy through it, he was even able to shatter large rocks and stones with it. Admittedly a much more passive weapon than the traditional Jedi lightsaber, Baas's staff was still quite effective in battle. The staff offered greater surface area for parrying, and the length increased his range. Also, being a staff, the weapon could be used to disable opponents without seriously hurting them, in keeping with Jedi philosophy. However, this is likely to be a fight to the death, so let's assume that Baas is using this thing to break bones. However, for all of its advantages, the staff isn't completely flawless. It will eventually cave under repeated lightsaber strikes, though whether this is simply the staff itself breaking, or Baas himself weakening from the continuous effort of empowering it. Whatever the case, it does limit the duration that Vodo Baas can continue fighting. Up till now, I've always been comparing lightsabers and balancing out between lightsaber variants. Now, I'm comparing a lightsaber to a Force-imbued staff. This is odd and obviously unbalanced. Apples versus oranges. I much prefer oranges. Anywho, we have the cutting power of Kenobi's lightsaber and the range and leverage offered by Baas's staff. One is more reliably lethal, the other provides more options in combat. However, Baas's staff will eventually cave and break under prolonged assault, limiting the duration of time that he can continue fighting. Kenobi's lightsaber, on the other hand, has no such weakness. I give Obi-Wan Kenobi the edge in terms of armament. And now, the verdict. I think we can all tell where this one's going. Vodo-Siosk Baas is without a doubt an extremely formidable Jedi warrior, a definite force to be reckoned with. But Kenobi has years of experience as a military leader, and is a talented and seasoned lightsaber duelist, having bested opponents ranging from fallen Jedi to Sith cultists to his own apprentice, who is regarded by many, including Kenobi himself, to be the superior fighter. Vodo Baas does have battlefield experience, and he has been in several duels, but his experience is comparatively limited next to Kenobi's 3 years of continuous fighting in the shitstorm that was the Clone Wars. While Baas is without a doubt the greater master of the Force, Kenobi's abilities provide him with more options, whereas Baas's powers are too specialized to provide many tactical opportunities. Even the unorthodox nature of Baas's weapon is compromised by both the inherent flaws of the staff itself and Kenobi's experience against staff weapons. be it Darth Maul's saber staff or the electro staffs of the IG-100 Magna Guards. In the end, Vodo-Siosk Baas can't compare with Kenobi's breadth of experience, and while he would give Kenobi grief, he wouldn't be able to take him down. If the two of them actually met, Kenobi would do everything short of bowing down and calling him master, because we all know that Kenobi is humble to the point of complete self-deprecation. But if the two of them got into a scrap, Kenobi would completely waste Baas. I declare the winner Obi-Wan Kenobi. Alright, this is just my opinion. If you have a short comment, chime in below. If you have an essay comment, just message me. This is Jensare, signing off.